Good afternoon. I would like to thank everyone for participating in this training via Zoom and by telephone. My name is Sharon Franklin. I am Chief of Operations for the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice, a project of People's Action Institute. For those of you not familiar with CHEJ, our primary work involves providing grassroots organizing, political engagement, and technical assistance to community-based groups and organizations nationwide. Today, our presenter is Mary Grace Wolf. She is CEO at Innovative Fundraising, LLC, and has facilitated hundreds of fundraising trainings and mindset workshops. She has been working in grassroots fundraising for over 19 years. Mary Grace specializes in raising money from individuals. Today's presentation will be for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then we will open the floor up for questions. We plan to answer as many questions as time permits, and we will close promptly at 1 o'clock. The training is being recorded for distribution with accompanying slides and information to all registrants. Before we get to Mary Grace, I have a few housekeeping issues. At last count, over 100 people registered. In order to eliminate background noise, everyone has been automatically muted. During the presentation, should you have a question, please put it in the chat. It will be answered during the Q&A session. After we have responded to the chat questions, please raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask your question. For those on the telephone, unmute yourself and ask your question. After you've asked your question, please *6 again and put yourself back on mute to eliminate background noise. Mary Grace, it's up to you.
All right, cool. Thanks so much for having me. Good morning, good afternoon, depending upon what time zone you're in. I'm really happy to be here. I think if I'm not mistaken, this is my third year doing this session or doing a fundraising session with the CHEJ family and network. And I'm just so honored to continue to be asked back. And I think we can all agree this is a really important time to really focus on fundraising for your respective organizations, projects, what have you. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, specifically how to do individual donor visits. I'm going to try to talk relatively fast because I have a good amount of content to share with you. And I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A, like Sharon said. So just a little bit about me. Sharon already introduced me. I won't belabor the point, but I did want to share our company's website in the chat. So as she mentioned, I run Innovative Fundraising, and we work with progressive organizations across the country to help them raise more money for their important work. Special place in my heart for environmental and environmental justice organizations. I spent my first decade focusing on the environment pretty much exclusively, and we still work with a number of environmental groups and climate justice groups. So really happy to be in this space and just want to thank you all for your work. I live in Aurora, Illinois, which is about 50 miles west of Chicago, with my wife and my two kiddos who are 7 and 10. And I'm a career fundraiser here to help you raise more money, like I said. So let's talk about what an individual donor visit is and what an individual donor visit drive is for starters. So this presentation is really focused on encouraging you all to sit down with as many of your priority donors. Let me say it that way and I'll elaborate. Sit down in person or on Zoom with as many of your priority donors and ask them to give more money to your organization. Simply. That's what we mean by an individual donor visit, right? So there's a lot of components there, and I'm going to go into them, and I'm going to give you materials and help you make sure that you feel confident and set up for this. But the individual donor visit drive is just a way to say, this is the time of year that my organization is doing this and prioritizing individual donor visits. You could also use the word campaign if that feels better and more relevant to you. So this is the individual donor visit campaign. This is the time that we're doing this. And probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, the more folks you can have involved from your side of things doing fundraising, the more money you're going to raise, right? So I am betting that there are folks on in the meeting here that are one person shops. Maybe you're lucky enough to have one or two or three others on your staff. The organizations that have the strongest individual giving programs have everybody involved in fundraising, at least at some level, that have their hands in it. So I would offer that to you in terms of food for thought is who can you recruit to have these fundraising conversations in addition to yourself? Do you have staff that can do it as well? Do you have board members, maybe volunteers or member leaders that you can say, hey, we're doing this thing. Here are the materials. Here's how you do it. And here's a list of people for you to reach out to schedule these visits. Um, so let's talk a little bit about, how you're going to launch this at your organization and why we're prioritizing this tactic over other fundraising tactics, because I'm guessing that some of you might be thinking about that. Well, what about digital fundraising? What about phone? What about events? There's a long list of different things that fall under the umbrella of bringing in independent money. And we all love that independent money, right? Because it's more flexible. You don't have to write a grant proposal or a grant report for individual donations, at least not most of the time. Maybe you do if you get like $100,000. Oh, there's a comment that slides disappeared. I do still see them. Do others see slides?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Click at the top if folks are having trouble. Click on Sharon Franklin's screen and you might see the slides again. So we love the independent money because it's flexible, like I was saying, because you can use it for whatever piece of your work you need it for, and because you can also almost always use it for general operating money, which we all need, right? So it's not the super specific money. In the whole grand scheme of things of how we bring in independent money, I really encourage all of my clients and all the groups that I know to prioritize individual donor visits over the other tactics, because I'm betting that you have limited time, so you can't do everything, number one. And number two, because individual donor visits set you up as the fundraiser to make a much larger money ask. So this is an important grounding here. This is an important concept to digest before we go further, which is that individual donor visits are meant to get bigger checks, get bigger donations. So we're talking about asking people for $500 or $1,000 or $5,000 or maybe more. And when we do digital fundraising, event fundraising, phone, text, direct mail, any of those other tactics, typically we're asking people for much smaller, more grassroots level donations, which are very important. I love grassroots fundraising, but this is bigger bang for your buck, pun intended. Okay, so that's why we're prioritizing the individual donor visits. You're going to raise more money if you spend the same amount of time on this, and that as you would on something else, you'll walk away with more money here. We are making a distinction between impulse gifts, and on the one hand, impulse gifts, and on the other hand, significant, thoughtful gifts. So let me explain what I mean by that. So all those other tactics we just talked about, the vast majority of individual donations that come into any organization across the country are coming in on impulse. They're what I would call an impulse gift. So probably everybody on this call has made an impulse gift or maybe many impulse gifts. So you get a phone call and you're in a good mood that day and you give your favorite environmental group $50 or $100. You get an email from Bernie Sanders or whatever that says, hey, you should give to this group. You throw them $25 or $50, whatever the thing is, right? You get a good fundraising text and you give that way. Those are gifts or contributions made without thinking too much about it. So we make impulse gifts usually without checking our bank account, without talking to our partners or our spouses, or without worrying it's going to upset the apple cart in terms of our finances that week or that month. So that's all good and well. And in individual donor visits, we're asking people to give usually 10 times the amount that they've given in an impulse gift. That's our starting point fundraisers math. Now, you're going to take that default math, if you will, and you're going to apply what you know. You're going to apply a level of nuance that I don't know. So I'm just going to pick somebody at random. Anne, I see you on the screen. So you're going to say like, oh, that's all well and good, Mary Grace, but I know that this person, actually, I should only ask them for 5 times as much, not 10, or this person has way more capacity. We should be asking them for way more than 10 times what they gave in an impulse gift. But if you don't know anything else, so you just have a list of folks who have given to your organization in the past, my suggestion is, and we're going to go into this in just a second, you schedule with as many people as you possibly humanly can, and you ask them to give 10 times the amount. Some people will give what you ask for, which is amazing, right? That's the best case scenario. Some people will go, yes, I can give you $1,000, and they've given 100 previously or something like that. Most people will meet you somewhere in the middle. So not only do we think people have more ability and willingness to give more than what they give in an impulse gift, and that's what data shows, but also this is just like tried and true, we're targeting high, right? And so Diana, if you go out and you ask a bunch of people for $2,000 because they've given $200 previously, my best guess is that you're actually going to walk away. The majority of those people are going to give you checks for 1,000. They're going to cut it in half, which is just like human nature for many of us, right? So I'll move on, but that's why we're prioritizing donor visits. Actually, can you go back just one slide for a second, Sharon? I'll be quick about this. Yeah, if you can go back one more, is that you're going to raise more money. Can you go back 2, 3? Sorry.
Sorry, I'll try to go back. Keep talking. I'll try to go back.
Okay. So the how to do this at a high level is, number one, you want to identify your list. So who do you want to ask to do an individual donor visit with you? There is a lot of attrition every step of the way. That's perfect, Sharon. There's a lot of attrition every step of the way. And so my best suggestion as a starting point is that each person who's going to be doing an individual donor visit drive, that you start with a list of 40 names, 40 people, ideally that have given to your organization before. But if you don't have that many, that's okay. That's real. I have lots of clients who are like, I have 20 people, right? And so then maybe you would add 20 prospective donors. But the reason that I want you to start with 40 is because usually how it works is that if you really work the list, so to speak, which means calling through 10 times, and I'll speak more to that in just a second, usually can reach half the people on the list. So we've already come down to 20 people from 40. We've cut it in half. So you start with 40, you're talking to 20. Usually half of those people say yes to a visit and half say no. So now we're down to 10. So you have to start with a much larger list than what you could manage to meet with, because it's gonna whittle down really fast here. The calling through the list 10 times tends to scare people, but it's actually not scary. So let me walk you through it. This is meant to be 10 times over the course of 4 to 6 weeks. So I do not mean, hey, Gwen, sit there and call somebody 10 times today. That is stalking. We're not going to do that. We're not going to go down that road. Thank you for the laugh, Sonia. One of the only people I can see. I appreciate that. But if you think about 10 times over 4 to 6 weeks, it's not so stalkerish, right? Because we're really talking about like 2 or 3 times a week. And of course, once you talk to somebody, you strike them off the list. You check them off the list. So once you talk to somebody and they say yes, you schedule it. They say no, you say no problem, check them off the list, and you keep going. So also your list is whittling down. It's getting easier and quicker each round of calling you do. But for reasons I cannot explain to you, there really are a lot of people that will answer on the 9th or 10th time. I don't know. They were just really busy all those other times I called them. And then they answer and then I schedule with them. So that's why I say you have to be um, pleasantly persistent. Let me put it that way. You have to treat this like a campaign. So I always say to folks that are in community organizing and advocacy work, you wouldn't just call through a list one time of organizers and activists inviting them to an action or a meeting or a community, whatever, and say, okay, great, I called everybody one time. Nobody would do that. You'd get fired immediately. This is not the job for you, right? This is not the line of work for you. Please apply that energy to this. Think of it as a campaign. You really have to be pleasantly persistent and, very assertive about it. So you identify your list, you call through the list 10 times ish. You do the visits, as many as you possibly can. And then you remember to do the administrative work. And what does that mean? It means something different for every group on the call, I'm betting. But at a minimum, it means taking notes. What did you talk about with the donor? How much money did you ask them for? How much money did they give? Is there any follow-up that needs to happen? You need to invite them to something. You should send a thank you card to everybody you meet with. That's all administrative work. And where does that land in some sort of tracking mechanism, whether that's your database, your CRM, a Google spreadsheet? I'm not precious about it, but it needs to land somewhere, because the idea is that the donor visits that Sharon is doing in the month of May, let's say right now in 2025, she's building or improving, expanding a portfolio of donors that she'll go back in May of 2026, which is another key thing here to just keep in mind. This isn't meant to be like one off, we raise a bunch of money right now, isn't that so great? But actually, you want to go back to these donors ideally every single year. And they won't increase forever, but my experience is that many of them will increase for a few years before they plateau off. So that's really nice, because basically you'll reap the rewards of the hard work you put in the first year, in the second, third, fourth, etc. years. Okay, next slide, please. So this process is very phone intensive. It's pretty old fashioned, and I mean that in a good way. I'm 42, but I've had enough with the emails and the texts. I'm like, can we get back to basics? Let's just actually talk to human beings. So the calling piece of this is very, very important. It's a bunch of calling and a bunch of sitting down and talking to folks. So that's what I mean by old fashioned. So you need to actually schedule calling time. You can't just say, okay, well, I'm going to squeeze in a couple of hours of call time this week. Y'all are too busy for that, I'm guessing, if you're like everybody else I work with. So you actually have to schedule it. Sunday late afternoons to early evenings tend to be the best times to call. What I mean by that is that we experience higher contact rates. More people are picking up the phone on Sunday afternoons and evenings. And then just in general, after that, weeknights are a good time to call. But don't underestimate daytime calling too. More than ever, people now have more flexible jobs, more work from home jobs, where they'll answer the phone in the middle of the day at 11 a.m. or 2 p.m. or whatever. And then also you'll get the folks with atypical schedules, you'll get the retired folks. So the daytime calling is still, you should do it. But we tend to see the larger contact rates at nights and definitely on Sundays. Be flexible with your donors. What I mean by that is the default thing here is that you will meet with a donor on Zoom, or if you're in the same location, meet them at their house, meet them at a coffee shop, meet them in person. I think there's magic that happens in person, although my life is very virtual at the moment. So be as flexible as possible. Do whatever lands you the meeting, the visit. If you are in person, give yourself enough time between the visits. So these visits in person, you should allocate an hour. You should allocate 60 minutes. They're usually 45 to 60 minutes. And you want to make sure that if you got a bunch scheduled, you weren't stacking them too close together. So what's not going to work is Wednesday, 9, 10, 11, 12, you can't get to the next one, right? Even virtually, you need a bathroom break and you need to eat and all that good stuff, right? So just make sure that you're giving yourself enough time between visits. I will check the chat in 1 second. Send a calendar invitation. So do everything you can to really make sure the person knows you are taking this really seriously, you will be there, etc. And then confirm them. So you want to a couple of things here. One is the best case scenario is that you will schedule a visit as soon as possible. And the reason is that life gets in the way. So it's okay if it's in 2 weeks or something like that. But if I get, Gwen on the phone today and I can get a coffee visit with her tomorrow at 8 a.m., that is the best case scenario. It may not work with my schedule or Gwen's schedule, but as soon as possible. That being said, if you can't get it, literally within the next 24 hours, 48 hours, make sure you do a confirmation call the day before. And the confirmation call is not, hey, I wanted to check and see if this still works for you. It's much more assumptive, which is a theme throughout this whole training and this whole process. I'm so excited to meet with you. I'll be there, or I'll see you on Zoom tomorrow at 2:00, right? So you can hear that confirmation is very assumptive, not questioning. Okay, a couple of questions in the chat that I don't want to lose track of. Call and email, is there merit to that, or should we stick to making calls every time? My take is that you should make several calls before you go to email, and then email is sort of like a last resort way to schedule with somebody. Whether it's counterintuitive or not, you are much more persuasive on the phone than anybody is on an email. So you can convince somebody to do this and say, oh, this is really easy. It's quick. And here's the reasons why we're doing this. You can do that more effectively on the phone. But if you really just cannot get a hold of somebody, then yeah, of course, pivot to an email and see if that works. And you might get 1 or 2 scheduled that way. I would not leave a message each time. I would leave a message on the last call that I make, where I'm like, okay, this is my 9th or 10th time, and then I'm calling it quits with this person. And that's really just meant to be a time saver for you all, because I have very few people ever call me back. I could probably count on one hand how many donors have called me back. Like, it's just, that's not the way that it goes unless you know them. In that case, this is different, right? So like, Stuart, I'll just pick you. If you're like, okay, these are the top 5 people on my list of 40. We have a texting relationship. I know them. They're going to know who I am. Oh, do whatever save yourself some time and schedule these over text. Like, I'm not precious about it, right? But most people are not going to listen to your message. And if they do, they're not going to call you back. So I would wait until the end of the process, just as a time saver for you. Okay, there's 1 or 2 questions, and then I'll move on. And then Harriet, yeah, the visit can be physical, in person, I should say, in-person visit, but it absolutely doesn't have to be. And in fact, for so many of our groups, right, it's just impossible because we have donors all over the place. So if you are a group and I'm thinking of one client right now, you're a group in Texas and you have donors in California and Ohio and wherever, like, you would just obviously default to Zoom. And think about doing in-person ones for those that are local if you can, but it's not necessary necessarily. And then how much time? Yeah, so the virtual meetings or visits, I should say, the virtual visits are usually 30 to 45 minutes, because you don't have the walking into their house and they're making you a cup of coffee and like all of that you have in person. So they're a little shorter, 30 to 45 minutes in person, 45 to 60 minutes. And I would definitely budget for all 60, because sometimes you get chatty folks, which I'm chatty, so I get it. Dorothy says, how do you choose your donors? So I would start with the folks who have given the most to your organization and work your way down the list. So the top 40 people specifically, a good place to start is anybody who has given $100 or more to your organization, pull that list and see what you get. Some of your groups, that's going to be way too many people, like 200 people. Okay, you're going to have to whittle it down. But if you need more, then you'll have to add prospective donors, folks that you feel like should be giving and could be giving to your organization, but have not yet. But start with the $100 level and up, and see what you get. The other key point here that you'll want to keep an eye out for as you're cutting your list is what contact information you have for folks, because you really need, the vast majority of the time, you really do need their phone numbers, and we just don't have phone numbers for everybody on our list typically. Some groups are really good about getting that contact information, but most of us, it's fairly spotty. And so it's hard to make this process work without a phone number, although you could obviously email people if you had no other way to find their phone number. Okay, so let's move on to my last slide here, before we do more open Q&A. And I'm going to drop this material in the chat. And for anybody who wants to, I'm very big on sharing materials and resources. We do not need to reinvent the wheel here. Please use this. Please just make a copy and then you can have it for yourself. And this is a much longer material. Look at it later, but you can also, kind of follow along if you want. There's a script for calling and there's a more detailed donor visit outline. But I'm just going to go over at a high level, essentially what your agenda is. So what the donor visit components are when you are having these conversations. So the beginning, greeting and chit chat. I know that sounds funny to even discuss that you need to have chit chat at the beginning, but sometimes we're nervous and we're like, we launch right into the agenda, and that is weird. We don't want this to feel like another meeting someone's at. It's a coffee visit. It's a chit chat. That kind of vibe is what we're going for. So you do need to, how's your day going? This is a cool neighborhood you live in, or if you're on Zoom, cool picture behind you, whatever the thing is. So you can do a little bit of greeting and chit chat at the beginning. You do want to make sure that they understand your purpose here, what the agenda is, and that you're on the same page about timing. So we talked about timing here. You just want to say, usually I spend 45 minutes if I'm on Zoom. Usually I spend 45 minutes with someone. Does that work for you? And most of the time it does. Sometimes people will say something like, oh gosh, I didn't know that. I have to go pick up my kid in 20 minutes, or I have to run to this other meeting. And then you go, no problem, I'll shorten it, right? So you just want to make sure you're on the same page about timing. The agenda, the most important thing, and this is all in the materials, so you don't need to like frantically take notes on this. It's literally written out for you. But the most important thing is that we're being very transparent, very crystal clear that we're going to ask them for money. We don't want that to be a surprise. It's not meant to be a surprise for anybody. So I would say something like, thank you again, Dorothy, for taking the time to sit down and meet with me. I'm excited to get to know you better, tell you more about myself, tell you about the work that we're doing right now, and ask you to make a contribution again, or ask for your financial support, or talk to you about your financial support. So again, we want them to know that that is definitely coming. You then pivot to your personal story, which I'm sure you all are probably really good at delivering at this point in your career. So why do you do this? How long have you done this? Why this type of work? So what brought you to it? So your personal story. And then you offer them time to share about themselves. So number 4 here, getting to know the donor is really an important piece, because without that piece, it's a presentation by you, and you do not want that vibe. You want it to feel organic and back and forth. And so, I like to ask really open-ended questions. So what about you? Where are you from? And what made you give to us originally? Or what do you think about the way things are going in our country? I mean, that's a can of worms, but it's a great can of worms, right? Because everybody has something to say. So it gets or most of us, I'm sure. So it gets them going. Like what's making them tick? Where are they on the political spectrum, whether you're political, quote unquote, or not, like it's good to kind of gauge that. What other things do they give to? Just like what's going on with them. And then you shift to 2 stories about the work that your organization does. I think it's important to limit it to 2, because I bet you all could talk about your work all day long, and that's really, really great, but it's just way too much for somebody to digest in one conversation. So I like to limit it to 2 stories. The first is a victory, or you could call it a success story. So just pick one thing that you can speak on that you're passionate about that's happened over the last 2-ish years, 2 to 3 years, where you can say, here's what we set out to do. This was the goal. Here was the beginning, middle, and end. We won. We were successful. We passed the bill. We organized the community to do this. We did whatever, right? Whatever the goal was. And we're strategic and smart and we get things done. That's what you want to relay for that story. Whatever fits into that box for you and your organization, that's the point where that's great. That's really cool. I didn't know that. Or yeah, I saw an email about that. And so they're reminded. And then you say, right now, the thing I'm most excited that we're working on is, and then fill in the blank there for the current body of work, current campaign, current issue you're working on, current project, whatever language fits with your org. This is all leading up, of course, to the ask for money, the fundraising ask. So at this point in the conversation, I like to just take a little bit of a step back and say, that was a lot of info I gave you. Do you have any other questions about the work that we're doing, or does that all sound good? 9 times out of 10, people go, yeah, it all sounds good. Sometimes they'll ask a follow-up question. They might ask a question about your budget or your staffing or your board or something like that. But usually they just say, yeah, this is great. I'm so glad that I'm involved here. Then you ask for money. And we have, you can see all the way down. I will also drop this in the chat. At the end of page 5 here is the ask for money that has been used for many, many years at many, many organizations. So I really like this ask, but you can obviously find your own words and your own language here. The things that I will point out about this ask for money is that even though it isn't undeniably an ask for money, you'll notice that there are no question marks. There are only periods at the ends of the sentences. There are only statements, and that's on purpose because the best fundraisers tell a donor what they need and wait for them to react and then carry the conversation on. Yes, we'll send you all of these materials, Dr. Sandy. Yes. So that's the first thing, is that it's only statements, no questions. The second thing is, and you can see there's just a placeholder here where you would plug in your numbers, but the way that this is set up is that the fundraiser, you share a goal. It's in the Clayton, it's just in the chat. I just popped it in the chat, but it's also at the bottom of page 5 in the materials. So to support all of this great work, I'm working to raise X number of dollars this month. And then I'm asking you to make a significant investment of fill in the blank. So we want to say it as a statement, share what our goal is for the discrete time period, and ask for a specific amount of money. Reminder, usually 10 times what they gave in an impulse gift, unless you have information that tells you to ask for a different amount. From there, one of a few things happens. Best case scenario, as I mentioned at the beginning, is they say yes. So I ask Harriet for $1,000 and she says, yes, I can do that. And I say, great, thank you so much. Here's how you do it. Second best case scenario is that Harriet says, I don't want to do that, or I can't do that right now, but I can give you $500. So the second best case scenario is that they retarget themselves, which saves you a lot of work. And you just go, great, thanks. So same reaction for those first 2 things. Great, thanks. The third thing that can happen, and happens very often, is that they don't do either of the first 2 things and they just start basically thinking out loud. So if Stephen asked me for $1,000 right now, I might say something like, oh, well, I would really like to. And I have 2 young kids. I'm already thinking about college, so money is always on my mind. Like, I would just start thinking out loud, and it would be very important for Stephen to, and you'd be very good at this, Stephen, actually, zip the lip and be patient and sit there and collect that information. But it's hard for most of us. It's hard for me because you want to, like, Cindy, I see you nodding. You want to like interject and be like, sorry if I asked for too much, or like, oh, right? You kind of like, you feel this tension and this awkwardness. The skill is that you'll develop over time, or maybe you already have it and you just want to keep writing out that skill, is to sit and listen, zip the lip, because you learn so much sometimes from donors. So it's really important to zip the lip. And then the 9th point here, where it says retargeting if needed, what I mean by that is that if I ask Cindy for 1,000, oh, this and that, I've got all these things, whatever. And she doesn't land herself on another amount. So she's just like, yeah, I can't do 1,000, right? I'm not doing that right now. It would be my responsibility to say, no problem. I want you to give an amount that you feel comfortable with. And I'm so grateful for whatever amount you can give to my organization. And instead of 1,000, I'd love to ask you to give 500. So that's what retargeting looks like. Typically I go halvesies, but that's not, you kind of got to go with your gut. Sometimes you would do 75% of what you originally asked. Sometimes it would be 25%, but you would just ask for a second amount that is less than what they said no to. And then the bottom part here, number 10, and then I'm gonna stop because I know I've been talking a lot and I know there's questions, is just what happens between when they've landed on an amount and the meeting ends, whether that's closing the Zoom or leaving the coffee shop or whatever. So I really, 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 and this is a key thing here, y'all, I really want y'all to get as much money in hand as you possibly can, because chasing donors down is not fun. Take it from me. So some donors, you can't get it in hand. Doesn't matter who's asking, doesn't matter how magical you are, it's never going to happen in the moment. And let me tell you who those people are. Before I got married, I was just like, oh my God, these married people with their spouses. And then I got married and I was like, I totally get it. So people who say my spouse or my partner and I have a policy where we have to talk to each other. Okay, you're not going to get that in the moment. People who say, I want to give you a check through my donor advised fund, and you can't get that in the moment. Or people who say, I have to look at my bank account, like there's some paperwork thing, right, that's separate. Then my best advice is that you need to make a good follow-up plan with those people. So no problem. Love for you to talk with your spouse. Today is Tuesday. Do you think I could give you a call Thursday morning to check in? Does that give you enough time to chat? So the having a clear follow-up plan communicates to them, oh, she's serious. I need to say yes, no, or maybe here. Like I need to have a next step. She's not going to let this just like go out into the ether. So that's that. But the majority of people, or at least half of them, you can close the deal, so to speak, and get the donation in hand. So if you are in person, the best way to do that is with an actual contribution form, like an old fashioned, like paper one, like we used in the 90s and the early 2000s, where the young people look at me like I'm crazy that I'm suggesting a paper form. I promise you it's the best thing, because you're at their kitchen table or you're at the coffee shop table or whatever, and Steven says, yeah, okay, I can do the 500. And I literally pull it out of my bag. Great, here's the form. It just takes a minute to fill out. And it is true. It just takes a minute to fill out. And then you would be putting that information in your through your donation link when you get back to your office or however you do it, and then you would shred it, right? That's the process there. If you are virtual, you obviously cannot pass a contribution form through Zoom. So what you do want to do is you want to have your donation link from your website or however you take money. You want to have that ready in the chat. So the second that Stuart says, yeah, I can do that, I push enter, I push return. Great, thank you so much. The easiest way to do that is to just do this while we're on Zoom together. It just takes a minute. So the way you say it is more important than what you say, right? You're hearing in my tone and you're hearing just the sense that I'm giving is like, everybody just does it this way. I know that not everybody does it this way, but having that attitude, again, that pleasantly persistent, this is quick and easy, this is how folks support us, means that you'll bring in more money and you'll bring in more in hand. And then the last thing here is that once the money part is taken care of, I either got the money in hand, you gave through the link, or we have a really clear follow-up plan. I'm going to be calling you Thursday at 9 a.m. after you talk to your wife type of deal. That's when I would love for you to do any secondary asks. And what I mean by that is, are you going to invite this person to testify at a hearing, come to an event, come to a community meeting, et cetera, any of those other things? Please don't ask for those things before you ask for money and get that all finished up, because people will go, oh my gosh, I already did this thing. I'm coming to this meeting. I'll give money later. So please focus on money and then make the secondary asks. Okay, so thank you, Stuart, for filling in for me in the chat. Appreciate that. Let's open it up for questions, comments, challenges, unless Sharon and Stephen, y'all have anything you want to add here or say.
The information, that this is all going to be in the slides as well, and plus what the things that you have in the chat, and then the things that CHEJ, our fundraising things. All of this will be in the slides that we're sending. Now we can go back to Q&A.
Okay, cool. Well, I see a question from Kelly in the chat. If they say no to a gift, do you still move on to the secondary ask? It depends. If they say no, I'm not giving right now, or I can't give right now, then the best thing to do is say, no problem. I would love for you to give at some point this year. And here's what our annual goal is. And so you're prefacing it with I'm going to check back in with you in a few months. That is my best advice with those people. But most people don't do that. Actually, once you get this whole way through the process, they've given you money before, you've made the phone call, you've scheduled the visit, you're doing the visit, you're going to get very few straight up no's. What you are going to get is no to that amount, because you've asked for this much larger amount than what they've given previously. So then in that case, 100%, please do retarget. And the reason I'm so big on say a specific number every step of the way is that people don't know what we're talking about unless they have something to respond to, right? So sometimes we'll ask people, we want you to give generously. Well, what the heck does that mean? Generously for one person is $15 and for the next it's 15,000, right? So nobody knows what we're talking about there. So you have to be really, really specific. That's what I've learned and experienced. Yeah, Emily, jump in.
Sure, thanks. And also, as someone who just rolled off my first ever political campaign, every single thing you've said is 100% the only reason anybody volunteered for the general election. Literally every single step. Yes, we had to call 25 times to get people to volunteer for a 2-hour shift. So
I believe it. I believe it.
So my question is, for those of us who are fundraising for organizations that are very small and have an executive director who has been around for a good amount of time, and therefore whose name and personal brand is to a degree a part of older fundraising, but we're working on newer, updated fundraising. Can you talk, and I'm very aware we have a mix in the room, so I realize you're talking to EDs and you're talking to those of us who support EDs, about how to navigate ways of reducing load on ED. Not every conversation maybe has to be a personal one with the ED. That's why we're lucky enough to have a little bit of support. But helping EDs feel comfortable with that and helping staff feel empowered to, maybe transition and take the baton from a donor who did give 8 years ago, but maybe therefore doesn't actually have a super personal relationship with the current ED, and how we can make that all work well for EDs that have been around for a good while and staff, fundraising staff that are newer and want to do their jobs.
This is a really, really good question. Thank you for asking it. So first of all, you're totally right that this is a different experience for executive directors to do this than the rest of us. I've never been I mean, I run a company now, but in terms of organizations, I've never been high enough up to experience the name recognition thing. It's always just like, who is this woman calling me out of nowhere from an organization I barely remember giving to 3 or 5 years ago. But what I've seen with clients is that executive directors often, or CEOs, whatever title you have, the heads, they can get away with more. It takes them less time to call through a list. They're getting more people answering, more people saying yes. They might be able to text and schedule a meeting or email and schedule a meeting in a way that I wouldn't be able to, because my name is just not going to register with the donor. I'm going to have to work harder for it. So that's the first thing, is like, just to know that. And everybody on your team should be doing donor visits. So kind of like, I hate to say like, oh, too bad, but like, too bad we don't all have that that level of notoriety. And so what I think will help you more, though, specifically is, and hopefully everyone on the call, what I would do is I would have every executive director, if I had my way, I would have every executive director have a portfolio of 15 priority donors that have given to your organization in the past, and 5 prospects, meaning 5 new donors who have never given to your organization, but totally should. You can think of those people off the top of your head. Oh, so-and-so works with that group. We see them all the time. Or like, this volunteer leader has been volunteering with us for 10 years. They should totally be giving, like, whoever falls into that category. And so what that means is, if you have 10 or 15 tried and true major donors, and then you have 5 prospects, and you're going to have a list between 15 or 20 for your ED, and do not put any more on their plate. It's just not going to work. So whether they're the best person or not to talk to donors, it doesn't matter, because it's not going to be possible. So no more than 20 total for the ED. And then everybody else gets everybody else, right? So Emily, are you the ED, or you're not the ED? Okay.
Not in this particular case, no. Yeah,
Okay.
staff.
So maybe you're the second, like, you get the second tier. And then your organizer gets the third tier. And then, like, so on and so forth. You just like work your way down the list. And the other thing that comes to mind for me is, you talked about, oh yeah, the ED has all these relationships and, that kind of thing. And again, super helpful, not necessary to fundraise. Like, take it from me, who comes from more of a grassroots, like, I'm asking everybody. Nobody ever knows who I am type of thing until the second or third or fourth year. And then they do know who I am. But like, this comes up in my work a lot. Oh, I don't have these relationships, and so I can't fundraise. It's just not true. It's an excuse. And I don't mean to come across like so harsh about it, but truthfully, like, I don't know wealthy people. I don't have the relationships. Like, I'm sorry, that's not what we're talking about here. If you have donors on the list, if you have prospective donors, anyone can do this. Does that help?
Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks for taking the time to answer that. I hope some EDs in this room feel relieved at the notion that you don't have to make every single call. You can ask people to help.
Right. You should not. I mean, there's just like no way that, unless you really only have a donor list of 20 or 25, which is not, so you have to start somewhere. There's no way the ED or the CEO can do all of it anyway. It's just not a possibility, unless they just stop being the ED, which I think is not going to work very well. Okay. Couple of other questions. I will share my contact information, so that's coming in just a sec. Is there a time of year that's better or worse for a donor drive? That is an excellent question. No, not really. So I came from a model. I learned this tactic and not perfected, but got good at this tactic in a job where I was doing donor visits year round, 12 months out of the year. So to me, there's not a time that's necessarily better than others. Although it is true that the fourth quarter of the year brings in more money for most 501c3 nonprofit organizations. So, the fourth quarter is like real tricky, because December is a great time to fundraise. It's the season of giving, season of charity, all of those things. And everybody's really busy in December. Lots of our organizations close early. There's some significant problems with fundraising in December. But the statistic is that it's 31%. It hovers around there every year of all C3 money that flows into nonprofits in our country, happens in the month of December, which is wild to me. And about half of that, about 15% of all the C3 money across the whole 12-month year happens in the last 3 days of the month, December 29th, 30th, and 31st. So this is going off on another track that we're not focusing on today. But if you've ever thought to yourself, like, why do I get so many fundraising emails on New Year's Eve? It's on purpose because there's a bunch of giving the last 3 days of the year. I'm not suggesting you try to do donor visits on New Year's Eve. Don't do that. I mean, unless you're dying to do it, maybe you have a party with your donor, but like, yeah, definitely don't do that. But December is a key month to bring in money. In general, though, there's pluses and minuses about every month of the year. So I've heard people say, well, nobody fundraises in January. That's just crazy. Everyone's given all their money in December. Like, no, you can totally fundraise in January. I've also heard a lot of people say, nobody does this in the summer. Everyone's on vacation. Well, okay, we're not European. Like, not everyone's on vacation the whole summer. That would be amazing if we were. So, like, don't worry about it. For me personally, September is like a little bit of a hard month because I have 2 school-age kids, but I would not tell you don't fundraise in September, right? So you get my point. The short answer is not really. Just do what's best for your organization. And Trish, I see your comment. Yeah, that you're the only person who can ask for donations or sponsors. No, you gotta get that out of people's minds because that's just not gonna work. That's gonna drive you crazy. What else? Does anybody else want to come off mute and share anything or ask any other questions?
I'm sorry, I can't use the hand thing for some reason. So I had a question earlier up, which is, so I guess we could gather people's phone numbers if we made it a requirement online, but would doing so put off donors who would then have to give their phone number? What's the guidance on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Sorry, I missed that in the chat. My experience is, and data shows that if you require a phone number when you do a registration, you're going to raise more money in the long run, probably not surprisingly. Usually it's comms folks that push back on this and go, that's all well and good, but we can't sacrifice our list. We have to have all these people with their email addresses. It's a judgment call. You have to make that judgment call for your organization. I would require the phone number because you really do need it, not only for this, but just texting, right? Texting is really big to get them to do things and give money. So that's my take on that. And then if you have a list of people, I am really glad you asked this because I forgot to say, if you have a list of people where you're missing phone numbers, which is true for all of us. I mean, it's just true that there's some percentage or a large percentage of your list that we don't have the phone numbers. There's a few things that you can do. So there are a few paid tools that you can use. Like, for example, our company uses something called KindSight, which was formerly iWave. And it's not a it's not a magical thing, but sometimes I can put in like, okay, Harriet Festing lives here, and then it will pull information, sometimes including your phone number. There's also just Google. It sounds a little funny, but like people's phone numbers will pop up sometimes in Google. You can use whitepages.com. You can just use the internet. If you don't have the budget or you just don't want to go down the road of paying for something else. And then the other thing that I have found is that oftentimes a lot of the numbers that we're missing in our data for an organization, y'all have them in your cell phones. So where we'll have, Sonia Peterson, Louis is the member here, and we have the name and we have the email address and maybe even the mailing address. But then there's somebody who's like, oh yeah, I text with her all the time. Like, here's the number, right? Like, plug that into your data. I know that sounds silly, but like, I bet you have a lot of people who are involved in your org who you have their contact information. So that's a place that you could start as well.
I have a question about that. So I know in terms of like getting people's emails, there's the CAN spam and GDPR sort of thing. there are regulations around how you can use people's information. Is it okay to just get people's phone numbers that way? Are there any regulations around that and how you can use those numbers? I was just curious.
Not that I'm aware of if it's public information. And here's the thing that makes me not lose sleep over it is that if you get somebody who's precious about it, they're going to tell you on the phone, don't call me again. And then you just cross them off and you just move on. Yeah. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. We're also talking about a relatively low volume in the grand scheme of things. Like we're not telling you to call 5,000 people, right? Like it's a pretty small sample size in the grand scheme of things. So I would keep that in mind. And then let's do one more question from Stuart, and then because I'm just mindful of time here. So where do other fundraising activities such as special workshops, community dance, annual dinner fit in with this personalized one-to-one approach? That is a really, really good question, because what I see too often with the groups I work with is that they are much more focused on events, which I don't love because events take a lot of time and money to put on. So I just have to say, like, there's a little like, as a professional fundraiser, like I'm not the biggest fan of events, but I get that you want them for community building and other ways. The pitfall that I see that's an answer to your question is that they don't follow up with the folks that have been at the events with an individual donor visit. That's how this fits in. So let's say that you have your annual dinner, you have your gala, you have your, grassroots annual, picnic or whatever the thing is. Great. Bring in sponsorship, sell tickets, do fundraising activities maybe in the event, and then look at that list the following week and say, okay, I'm going to try to meet with these top 20 people or top 5 people or whatever the thing is as an organization. That's the missing thing for most programs that I would really, really recommend, especially if they've just been to something and they have a great, feeling about your work and your org. Like that's striking while the iron is hot to ask them to go to coffee or do a Zoom and ask them to give more. Before I wrap up, because Sharon, you might want to say a few words, I do want to share just one more thing in the chat, which is that my firm hosts and runs an annual fundraising conference. And so I'm going to put that Google Doc in the chat because the information is always being updated, which is why I'm sharing it that way. And I invite all of you to come. So it's super fun. It's a great way to sharpen your skills. It is in Minneapolis this year, September 18th and 19th. We're very generous with group rates, discounted rates, all of that. So just let me know what you need. And I will also put my email in the chat. And please don't hesitate to schedule. Actually, I'll put my Calendly in the chat too for anybody who wants to follow up. I would love to just talk to y'all individually. And thanks again. This has been so fun. I love doing these trainings.
Mary Grace, thank you again for an excellent presentation, and thank everyone for attending. The training is being recorded as well as the chat, and we'll probably have it distributed by this Friday to everyone who registered. Now, if you did not register, you won't be able to get the information, but you can email either Mary Grace or me, and we can send it to you, because sometimes some people weren't able to get in, but that's how that's worked. So we hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thank you again for attending.